Hey everyone and welcome. Today we are going to build the blueprint for your cloud kingdom. And its foundation? Well, it's one of the most critical topics in all of Azure administration, Microsoft Entra ID. Seriously, if you work with Azure in any capacity, understanding this is absolutely non-negotiable. All right, let's jump right in.
It all boils down to one simple but incredibly important question. Who gets the keys to your cloud kingdom? I mean, think about it. Every virtual machine, every single database, every app you deploy, you have to have a clear answer for this. Because uncontrolled access, that's the fastest way to lose the keys to the entire kingdom.
So, how do we manage all those keys? How do we make sure they only end up in the right hands? Well, that's where Azure's Digital Gatekeeper comes into play. This is the central command, the authority standing guard over everything you own in the cloud.
And that gatekeeper's name is Microsoft Entra ID. Now, you might know it by its old name, Azure Active Directory, but don't worry, it's the same powerful service. The best way to think of it is like the bouncer for your cloud club. Literally every single time someone or something tries to access one of your resources, Entra ID steps up, checks their ID, and makes sure they're on the list.
But here's the thing. Entra ID is way more than just a simple locksmith checking keys at the door. It's a full-blown identity management system. It doesn't just check identities, it actually creates the digital identities for all your users. It helps you organize them into neat, logical groups, it defines exactly what they can and can't do, and it even has a secure way to handle people from outside your company, like contractors or partners.
To really get how Entra ID works, we've got to start with the foundational structure. We need to look at the space where all these digital identities are going to live. It's your own private slice of the cloud.
And this space is called a tenant. Simple as that. The moment your organization signs up for Azure, you get your very own tenant. It's a completely dedicated and isolated environment that holds all of your company's users, groups, and applications. It is, for all intents and purposes, the property line for your cloud kingdom.
Now here's where it gets kind of cool. A single company can actually have more than one tenant. Just imagine a huge corporation that owns a bunch of smaller subsidiary companies. Each one could get its own tenant, its own separate building, so to speak, to keep all their user identities and security rules completely separate, even though they're all part of the same parent company.
Okay, so we've laid our foundation. We have our tenant. The next logical step, right, is to start populating it with the people who are actually going to be using all your stuff in the cloud.
And when we talk about people in Entra ID, you're basically going to be dealing with two main flavors of user accounts day in and day out.
On one side, you've got your internal users. These are your employees, the members of your organization. They get a full-fledged identity right inside your tenant. And then, on the other side, you have guest users. These are folks from outside your organization. Think contractors, partners, vendors. You invite them in for specific, usually temporary projects, and you give them very limited, tightly controlled access. Making that distinction is absolutely crucial for good security.
And here's a super important point. These user accounts aren't just a username and password. Oh no. They are packed with rich data. We call it metadata. Things like job title, department, their physical location, and so on. And this data, this is the secret sauce. It becomes the fuel for automating all kinds of access control later, which is where things get really powerful. So just hang on to that thought.
Now, once you have a bunch of users, trying to manage permissions for every single person individually, well, that's just a one-way ticket to chaos. And that is where groups come in. They're the elegant, smart solution for bringing order to all that potential chaos.
No, I'm serious. Just picture it. Let's say you have 50 IT administrators, and they all need the exact same access to a bunch of servers. Are you really going to sit there and click through 50 different user accounts, assigning the same permissions over and over and over? No way. That's a recipe for mistakes and a colossal waste of time.
This is where groups just save your life. And Entra ID gives us two really powerful ways to manage who's in a group. First, there's assigned membership. This is exactly what it sounds like. You have full manual control, you personally add or remove people. But the real magic, the real game changer is dynamic membership. This is where you let Azure do all the heavy lifting for you based on a set of rules.
So how does that dynamic magic actually work? Well, it's brilliant and surprisingly simple. First, you create a rule, and you base that rule on that user metadata we were just talking about. For example, you could say, any user whose job title is IT administrator belongs in this group. Then, Entra ID is constantly scanning all your user accounts. The moment it finds a user who matches that rule, bam, they're automatically added to the group. And get this, if their job title changes tomorrow, Entra ID automatically removes them. That is automation at its absolute best.
Now, it's also important to know that these groups generally serve two main purposes. You've got security groups, which are your go-to tool for controlling access to Azure resources, your virtual machines, your databases, the important stuff. Then you have Microsoft 365 groups, which are designed from the ground up for collaboration. When you create one, it automatically spins up a shared mailbox, a team calendar, a SharePoint site for files, the whole shebang.
Okay, so we've just laid out the entire blueprint, right? We've talked tenants, users, and groups. But let's take a step back. Why does mastering this stuff matter so much? What's the big payoff at the end of the day?
First and foremost, and this is the big one, better security. A well-designed identity system makes sure that only the right people can get to the right resources and only when they're supposed to. It is the absolute bedrock of a secure cloud.
Second, you get a huge boost in efficiency. When you use tools like dynamic groups and you have a clear structure, you're not burning countless hours manually clicking buttons and assigning permissions. The system pretty much manages itself, freeing up your team to do much more important work.
And finally, this whole blueprint is built to scale. As your organization grows and you hire more people, a solid identity foundation means you can onboard hundreds, even thousands of new users smoothly and securely. Your cloud kingdom can expand without the walls crumbling down.
You know, when you boil it all down, it really comes back to this one single powerful idea. This quote just says it all. You can't secure what you can't identify. Identity isn't just some boring administrative task. It is the core principle of all modern security.
So there you have it. We've walked through the essential blueprint for identity in Azure using Microsoft Entra ID. It's the fundamental structure that really makes everything else possible. So the only question left to ask is, now that you have the blueprint, what are you going to build and secure first?